Hello everybody, my name is Safi and welcome to Overcoming the Diet Mindset podcast. I am 7 years post-op and a trainee psychotherapist. On this podcast, my aim is to vanish crappy fad dieting and unhelpful thinking, to reclaim our mindset with a little rewiring so we can stop yo-yo dieting and get off the roller coaster for once and for all. Hello everybody, welcome to a new episode. I'm really excited about the guest that I have for you today. Harriet has been somebody that I have followed for a while now. Oh, put my teeth back in. I'm that excited. Harriet has been somebody who's introduced something very new to me alongside other people who I didn't know that I needed when I came onto the journey of recovering from yo-yo dieting, recovering from, constantly being in that vicious cycle of, restrict or binge and not knowing what was going on. So I'm really, really excited to have her. I'm so grateful. I know she's a very busy lady. I know you will get a lot from our conversation. Harriet is a therapist who's specialized in eating disorder. She's worked in the NHS. She has private practice. She has her own amazing podcast that I will let her tell you all about. She also has some really, affordable, accessible options now to work with Harriet because, we're all aware that it's not easy to have psychological support and not everybody is able to access it, especially via the NHS. In this current climate, we know the waiting lists are horrendous and a lot of us don't even have aftercare if we had weight loss surgery abroad. And so this could be an option, and I'll let Harriet talk about that option during our conversation. So Harriet, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. Could you please tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me on. Really pleased to be here. Yes, my name is Harriet Frew. I'm a therapist and I have worked in eating disorders for 20 years, which is a bit scary. So I very much came to this as a wounded healer. I had bulimia nervosa from my late teens and into my 20s. Sorry, my cat is meowing at my feet. You can hear a meow in the background.
It's fine. Mine does that all the time.
And I guess back in the day, there was very little help available, no specialist eating disorder help really, unless you had anorexia nervosa. And even then, I think it was really, really limited. So I decided quite early on, so in my early 20s, I wanted to, support people with eating disorders, and I sort of trained as a counsellor. And then was very fortunate to get a job in the NHS working for the Adult Eating Disorder Service at Adam Brooks. So that was great, fantastic opportunity. I really got to kind of learn my craft, I guess, and work with a lot of other professionals. And then I've always worked as well sort of privately alongside. And over time, I've done more and more private work. And now I literally just do like about a morning in the NHS sort of every week. So I just about got my hand in there. But I remain passionate about supporting people with eating disorders. I do believe full recovery is possible. And I guess in recent years as well, I've quite enjoyed getting into podcasting. I started the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast in 2020. Didn't know what I was doing, but just kind of been winging it since. And just exploring other things now as well. Like I've got an online course, 10 Steps Towards Intuitive Eating, a bite-sized therapy group on Patreon as well, with additional podcasts and video content. And train other counsellors now as well to work with people with eating disorders and body image. So got my hands in lots of pies actually, but it's great really, because I think when I was in my 20s, I used to always be drawing out this plan. This is what I want my life to look like. And it's taken me a while, but I feel I'm kind of there.
Amazing. Amazing. And I know the platform is quite new. Is it Patreon? I know it's quite, you've only, but I'm really excited that it's affordable. It's important for people. And I know it's very affordable. So do you want to tell us a bit about the idea and how why you decided to make it, and what, how can that help people who just want to maybe start on the journey of getting support? And
yeah, no, sure. Well, the Patreon is very affordable. So it's basically like a kind of membership, and you literally pay £5 a month. So if you already are a listener of the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast and you're wanting more of that kind of support, you're wanting more sort of therapy skills, you're wanting to perhaps submit your own questions, you can literally just sort of, sign up, and you can try it for a week first as well and see if it's for you. But what I'm trying to do there as well is be very specific to people. So say like, let me know your questions. What do you want to know about? So it's a chance to get a bit more personal input. But essentially it is sort of podcast, also a bit of video content. Sometimes I've got a couple of like more kind of lecture type content pieces in there, but it's a way really to understand your eating much more from a psychological perspective, and then working on skills and strategies for change. So really just kind of giving you that knowledge and understanding and empowerment, I suppose, in terms of what you would get in therapy if you worked on a one-to-one basis with a therapist, but it's kind of making those tools a bit more accessible, I guess, to everybody.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. And I think it's very much needed. So I think, I want everybody to get as much out of the time that we have with you, Harriet. So if we use almost me as an example, for example, I 8 years out from having weight loss surgery. And sometimes, it can get difficult, and weight does come back, as we know, there's set points. And so if you were, for example, talking to somebody like me that's struggling with regain, and I don't have aftercare. I've never had aftercare. I've never had any kind of psychological input in my journey. I went to Belgium, had weight loss surgery, came home, and never really spoken to anybody ever since. So for that person, I want, which is me and other people who do the same thing. What are the things that we can maybe start looking? So we've lost weight, it's coming back. We're starting to maybe snack more, and we're getting really upset about it. And I'm starting to rethink, what can I maybe go back to liquids? What can I do? So any advice for somebody at that place of just honeymoon's over, now what happens? What could be some of the advice that you would give somebody like me? I know, for educational purposes.
Sure. Well, I guess, what's really important is to be quite compassionate towards yourself, because obviously the weight loss surgery is a tool, isn't it, which can really, really help you. But if you have used food for a long time in your life to soothe your emotions, to kind of cope with stress, etc., by having the surgery, although that's a really helpful tool, it's not going to take away sometimes as well, I guess, those other needs that the food used to serve you. So I guess it is kind of helpful to begin to perhaps do a bit of that exploratory work, and sometimes this might need to be with a therapist or even just a bit of reflection. But I think sort of like, understanding a bit with your own history about why you have maybe used food to cope, having some compassion and showing yourself some understanding. And then I guess it's just like, increasing awareness as well. So noticing day to day, like you could keep, like, I'd call it like a well-being diary, not a food and feelings diary, because I think when we think of food and feelings diary, sometimes you think of like MyFitnessPal, recording all your food, judgment around that. But I suppose it's starting to create awareness as well, and noticing, what is your relationship between your emotions and what you're eating? Because I guess there's kind of two things going on here. Like with the weight loss surgery, it's not a magic wand, is it? And I guess there's some limitations about what you can achieve through the weight loss surgery. And I guess what you don't really want to be doing is like just starting to go back to dieting again, but at the new place, because in a way you're going to then reactivate all those old patterns, because of, we know that when people diet and restrict, they often end up binge eating, overeating. You're very vulnerable to that. And we know that from starvation studies. It's not, the human being is designed for survival. So when you restrict food, we know from the Minnesota starvation study that when people had their food restricted, they started binge eating. And these people didn't have eating disorders. They were just in that cycle. So I guess the main thing is starting to increase awareness. So I guess, if you are noticing old behaviors creeping back in, it's probably really important to recognize, actually, am I being restrictive? To a point perhaps where I'm just getting so hungry that then I'm turning to food because my brain is just like demanding glucose at all costs. So And I know well after the surgery, there are limitations with what you can eat, etc. But I guess, the importance within the parameters of post surgery of doing like regular eating, making sure you're keeping your blood sugar as stable as possible, and really kind of like implementing that self-care, making sure you're not going for long periods without eating, all of that. But I guess once you feel like you've genuinely got that more in place, then again, like through doing the well-being diary, you can start to notice, okay, when am I feeling out of control around food? Maybe when am I turning to food? Maybe to deal with a particular emotion. And I think the first step is always awareness, because of once we start to keep a diary, we have a bit more of a bird's eye view down onto our life. We can see, oh, this is interesting. It's when, I don't know, for example, I've got back from the school run and everyone's demanding things of me. Or it's when I have a conflict situation with someone, or it's when I'm bored, or, so I guess we start to see those kind of patterns. And I think awareness has to come first before you can actually make a change. But the first step is awareness. And then once you're more aware, you can start to think about how you might deal with some of those emotions differently. And I think sort of generally for people with eating issues, generally like food has often become the number one pleasure, the way of soothing, the thing to turn to. And I think one of the most helpful strategies almost is to really up your self-care and make sure you're really filling your cup, looking after yourself, because if you're not doing that, you're going to be really likely to turn to food as the kind of almost maladaptive way of coping, because food is soothing, food should be soothing, food is pleasurable, food should be enjoyed, but you want to feel like you've got lots of different options, I guess, not just food. So there's a few things in there. It's quite a big topic, isn't it?
It's amazing, because you are right. Food, and if you're somebody who struggled with, let's say you've had a high BMI most of your adult life, you struggled with weight, it becomes almost, you've internalized that narrative that it needs to be hard, go hard or go home, or you don't try hard enough. So actually, when somebody says to you, it's about self-care, it's about compassion, you almost think, what a load of nonsense, because you really want it to be difficult, because you really believe that it should be hard, and if there's something wrong with you, that you haven't worked hard enough, you haven't exercised hard enough. So we do tend to want to find the hardest plan possible for us to be able to. So is that making that switch from the fact that it actually doesn't have to be difficult? And I know, Harriet, that you advocate, you use intuitive eating, and that's something that you advocate for. But sometimes I think, especially for somebody who's had weight issues for a long time and then has had weight loss surgery, number one, we struggle to be able to know when we're hungry. So we're not in tune with our body anyway. For many years we haven't been. And then I think it's that bit in the middle. There's a gap. There's a bridge that's needed. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think definitely. I think you can't go from having a little bit of disordered relationship with food into intuitive eating. You need to have some stepping stones to get there. And I think, just having structure around your eating, like I very much to this day, very much like think of my regular eating, stabilizing blood sugar, planning a bit what I'm going to eat as part of my self-care, like really prioritizing that. So I think, again, if you don't have that structure, that sort of scaffolding with your eating as well, it's hard to be able to trust your body. You almost need to kind of kickstart the body to be able to tune in by giving yourself some structure and knowing when you're going to eat. And I think as well, to this day, I think, say, for example, if I was a pure intuitive eater, I might not eat breakfast in the morning. So I might think, actually, I'm not that hungry, but I will still, as part of my self-care, always have breakfast, because I know that I'm not going to be able to just suddenly have breakfast at like 10 in the morning when I suddenly feel hungry. So I think as well, people sort of have this fantasy sometimes that they're going to be in this, really kind of completely free place in a way where you can just completely go with the flow. You can just think about exactly what you want to eat it in the exact quantity, and heading for perfection around food, where in a way, actually, just the basic fundamental self-care of eating regularly, stabilizing blood sugar, I guess within the limits of what you can do post-surgery as well. Just making sure you're eating enough at meals as well to sustain you of the different food groups. All of that's going to really, really help to sort of help you reset your hunger and fullness cues.
Amazing. I think that's really, really helpful because, on social media, being part of the community, I see a lot of conversation around really fully, wanting to just, and it's really important. The thing is, when you first come out of your operation, it's important to have protein and do what the dietitian tells you to. But it's that transition from at some point not relying on protein shakes or protein bars to trusting yourself, to moving on and developing a new relationship with your body. And I think our community finds that really difficult because we haven't been able to trust our body, because it's never done what we wanted it to do. We've never been able to lose the weight like everybody else has. So I think sometimes, especially when I read stuff online now, I want everybody to know, to have patience, which I didn't have, Harriet. It's now doing all the work 8 years in, I understand that. And that's one thing I think you're saying is actually, listen to your body, stabilize your sugar. It's about taking care. And I really like that, because you're not saying go for it and eat, trust your body and eat whatever you like when you like, but listen to your body, which is amazing. Thank you so much. I think that's really helpful even for me to look at it from that point of view. So if you're working with somebody who says to you, I'm now 20 pounds, I've gained 20 pounds. My dietitian is telling me that I need to reduce my calorie intake to 800 calories a day. And then, every time that I think about going back to that appointment, all I want to do is eat. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, well, I just think we're the best will in the world, 800 calories a day. I mean, it's just so restrictive, isn't it?
It is some of the advice that's given with the best intentions in the world, but it is some of the advice that's given to some of the bariatric community, especially from dietitians who obviously just want those percentages of BMI to go down. And so I think it's really difficult, isn't it? Because they're the professionals and then you want to follow it, but what do you say?
I mean, I think it's really tricky, isn't it? Because I think generally just in the culture, a lot of medical professionals, dietitians, etc., very much come from that kind of weight-centric health model. And again, I guess I say that with compassion to them. It's kind of very much how people have been trained. And I know doctors as well often have like about 2 hours or something on eating disorders. So, and also we live in a culture that massively reinforces all of this, don't we? And then I think as well, people perhaps don't speak up enough about their struggles, because I think many, many people in the bariatric community, I mean, I have numerous people contacting me who are struggling and, but people don't want to talk about their struggles because they want to talk about the weight loss and post the pictures, and it's so understandable, isn't it? So it's really hard to talk about these things. But I guess as though an 800 calorie diet might feel very, very seductive, most people listening as well probably know, like from their past experience, that trying to stick to something like that, I mean, it's very restrictive, isn't it? And it's really hard to maintain in the long term. It's going to lead you to be probably quite preoccupied with food. Depending on your body, you might be experiencing some sort of starvation symptoms, So I guess I would just really warmly encourage people not to go down that road, although it feels really seductive, and trying to engage more with a kind of longer term. And I think it's tricky, isn't it? It's an adjustment perhaps of expectations, because I understand as well, when you've invested a lot in this surgery, you want to get to the pinnacle point. You kind of think, well, I've had to, sacrifice an awful lot for this. So now I don't want to not get to the end goal that I had in mind. So I think, it's a very understandable thing. Yeah. But I guess it's trying to find your sort of sweet spot, which is going to be different for everyone, isn't it? And it's trying to get that balance in a way, I guess, of getting the benefits of the weight loss that you have achieved, but also maybe it might be letting go of an expectation to get to a really smaller dress size or a particular weight that you've had in mind, and adjusting your expectations, but embracing more the longer term view of healthy relationship with food, not having to be preoccupied with food. And I think it doesn't have to be all or nothing, does it? I think probably people are really worried about, oh my goodness, I'm going to go back to where I was before and all of that. And I think actually you can step into a new place, and it takes time to find your sweet spot and just to adjust to your expectations. I think after you've had surgery and you're on a weight loss journey, it's really tricky because there's so much validation and feedback about your weight loss. It's really hard then when people are saying, focus on your relationship with food, because it's almost like you're pulled in two different directions, aren't you? Relationship with food is pulling you one way. The weight loss side of things is pulling you the other way.
Yeah.
So, I suppose I just want to say it's tricky. I think this is a hard thing, but I suppose I would just really encourage people not to go back to you don't want to just be back in the old cycles at a lower weight, because that's just a miserable place, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more, Harriet. And I think it's really hard. And we all say about, we should have more psychological support before we have weight loss surgery. But even, when at that point, you're desperate to have the weight loss surgery, you think it will answer all your prayers will be answered. So that's not the right time, really. I guess it's there to see if there's any underlying, eating disorders and so on, and just to keep everybody safe. But I think it was at least 2 years in before I realized there's something else at play here. So almost, I think everybody has to go through those stages of, ups and downs. And I guess it's just change with anything in life. It's going to have those ups and downs. And I think most people that I now have conversations with are people who are 2 years, 3 years post-op and realize, number one, why don't I feel the way I thought I was going to feel? And number two, why am I returning to wanting to constantly if I have, my boss say something, I just want to eat. And if my husband or the children or, just going back to that. So that makes loads of sense. And so just something that just popped into my head. What do you think from working in the NHS? And I'm aware that you weight loss surgery isn't your thing, but do you think the NHS could be doing anything differently in regards to what you've seen of weight loss, with the weight loss procedure, not the procedure, but the process of getting people prepared for the change, the psychological impact of something as extreme as weight loss surgery? Do you have any opinions?
No, definitely. I mean, I guess, just to sort of say that the service I've worked in the NHS was sort of eating disorders. And the way, what it's like in the NHS, it's very sort of partitioned, isn't it? So we just didn't see people with weight loss surgery. They were under a whole different service, so it was, things are kind of artificially partitioned. I mean, I know that some services are really trying to do more psychological work, aren't they? And have that as part of things. So I think you don't want to kind of knock anyone out there who's doing some really great work with trying to improve things. But I guess it's the psychological aspect is so important, isn't it? I think, often someone's struggled with their relationship with food for maybe it's 10, 20, 30 years, and then they're coming into surgery. So, 6 sessions of something is probably not going to cut it when you think about how long you've been struggling. And, I think it's really tricky, because I'm thinking as well what you're saying, that sometimes people are not even realizing till 2 years after. And maybe it is sometimes more of that kind of aftercare, because I think often, I'm thinking this works with people as well that are really underweight too. Often when you're so in the food side of things, whether it's whatever disorder you have, whether you're underweight, overweight, normal weight, sometimes you need to have that reduction in symptoms to be able to even get your head above water, to realize, oh my God, actually, this is not really about the food. It's about so much more. And that's sometimes where you need the help, isn't it? I'm thinking I'm working with someone at the moment who is, probably having a bit of an existential crisis a year on, because of kind of almost realizing it hasn't been the magic wand. And now it's like, who am I? What do I want to do? Where's my life going?
It's a lot of questions.
But I suppose it's just to normalize that, isn't it? For anyone who's listening to this, who's thinking, oh my goodness, this hasn't really I'm glad I've done the surgery and it's been a positive step. It hasn't sort of solved all my problems in the way that I thought. And I think that is just really normal. So going back to your initial question, I guess, more psychology is just really important, isn't it? Particularly, for people that are open and who want it, and to almost give yourself permission to need that as well. Because if you've struggled for years and then you just have a medical procedure or surgery, that can't just change your past and your old coping. So you've got to be quite kind to yourself there. In the same way that someone who had been using alcohol for years, maybe, and then they had something, some kind of I don't know, whatever it would be to intervene with that. It's not going to change the psychology of it without additional support. So you just got to be really kind to yourself, really, and appreciate, I guess, what's going on there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you bring up alcohol, and it's one of the things in our community also, that it transfers addiction, and it's something that we go from not being able to eat food and then being able to drink, and that's another factor that comes in, and it's really, people are ridden with shame over it because they replace one coping mechanism with another. And I understand, you just want to be able to, you've lost the one thing that you used to really enjoy, a Friday night, a Thursday night, a Saturday night, you were happy, you were sad, food was always your thing. And, the numbers of transference addictions very high. So let's, going back to your specialty of eating disorders, I know binge eating disorder is prevalent? Is that the word? Yeah. That my foreign accent and my dyslexia. But anyway, and I know that actually is the one treatment that doesn't really get the service that it needs, especially within the NHS. So for somebody who thinks there's more to it than just me wanting to eat, maybe the weight loss surgery affects, wearing off, and now there's more, how do we know? That's what I'm trying to say. I'm putting it awfully, but my question is, how does somebody maybe really start to think that there's something else going on? What are some of the telltale signs that there's more to this than just me wanting to eat all the time?
Yeah,
or overeat,
sure.
Rather.
Yeah, well, I guess so with something like binge eating, it's often so. I guess a definition of a binge is eating a large amount of food in a small amount of time. There's often a loss of control and real feelings of kind of guilt and shame. I mean, I think initial euphoria often, but then feelings of guilt and shame. And obviously, I guess post-surgery, I think you can't binge in the same way that you would have done before surgery. So I think often people that have suffered from binge eating disorder, they might have eaten huge volumes of food, pre-surgery. Once it's post-surgery, probably physically you can't eat as much, can you? But you might still have that kind of a bingey feel to it. It might feel like quite dissociative experience. You don't really remember what you're eating. You eat quite quickly. You eat the foods you feel that you shouldn't be eating. People will often eat during a binge the foods that they don't eat at other times. So yeah, I guess it's kind of like, binge eating, if you might relate to some of those symptoms. So I guess like feeling in a way, a bit of a loss of control, a bit out of your body. It feels a bit dissociative. It can often be a way as well to deal with difficult emotions. And, probably the pre-surgery, you may have turned to food. If you were overwhelmed with an emotion, it would have been quite an unconscious pattern of coping. You might have been overwhelmed with an emotion before you knew it, before you had even a chance to feel the emotion properly. You'll probably be turning to food. And then what the food does is it helps you numb, it helps you dissociate, helps you just kind of almost escape life for a little bit. It's kind of, and it gives you in the short term that kind of soothing, that kind of calming down, reducing anxiety. But then, of course, again, very quickly afterwards, you feel a lot of shame and guilt. And I think as well, people that binge eat can often fall into patterns then of wanting to purge through self-induced vomiting, taking laxatives, maybe really over-exercising. I think, again, these are things that are very difficult to talk about. Also, as well, sometimes what people will do, which is much more common than we realise, is chewing and spitting. So chewing the food, but not actually swallowing it as a way to try and get that kind of pleasure from the food and the coping from the food without actually ingesting it. So I guess, some people listening might relate to some of these behaviors. And I guess, if you do relate to some of these behaviors, you may have a diagnosable eating disorder, or you may have disordered eating. Sometimes you may not meet the full criteria, but I think if you are falling into these behaviors, they are quite serious and something to take seriously. Because I think a lot of people out there have lived with these behaviors for a very long time, and they feel it's kind of normal. And perhaps in the past, they've been praised for weight loss and almost, do you know what I mean? So that they feel quite conflicted in a way, because these behaviors are kind of helping them achieve their goals, although obviously in a very unhealthy way. So, yeah, I don't know if that's answered your question.
That's amazing. That's great, because that will give you things that you didn't think. For example, we call it slider foods. And, sometimes I do find myself eating, and I've had, what would, if I was diagnosed back then, would have been binge eating disorder. But, sometimes I can, anything that slides, chocolate, anything that doesn't, it goes down, and I can eat so much more of it, and I can feel that sense of calm straight away. But sometimes I don't know I'm doing it, and before I know it, I'm in the pantry until I have to calm myself down and catch myself. But yeah, no, definitely that's great, and I think it's beautifully put. I think another thing I just wanted to ask you about, which also happens quite a lot within our community, is wanting to exercise and over exercise, it's something, somebody who's been overweight for a long time, it's something that's physically really, something that you want to do, but you can't do because for a long time it's so painful. It's the first time I went for a run as somebody who had lost a lot of weight. Oh my goodness, I felt so light. It was just so much easier. So I see how it's important to move. But I do follow people who I can tell have now, it's become unhealthy. So if you could speak to that a little bit about what does that look like, and is that even a thing that people can, Yeah,
well, I think it's very easy to fall into, again, isn't it? Because I think in the culture we live in, there's so many messages about, do more exercise, move more. So even if you have fallen into a compulsive relationship with exercise, people around you might still really praise you. You might still feel like you're doing something really good. So I think it can be a bit difficult sometimes to untangle what's healthy and what isn't healthy. But I guess what's not healthy with exercise is if you feel like you almost have to earn all your food, that you can only eat if you're exercising, if you feel that a lot of anxiety, if you miss a session or something, maybe if you have to do it every day or for several hours a day, when you've got this big preoccupation and you're starting to avoid other areas of your life just so you can get all your exercise in, I guess that's when it's not so healthy. I mean, of course, moving our bodies is healthy. We know it's really great for mental health. I think, again, I'm just thinking as well, perhaps with the bariatric community as well, being less focused on weight and perhaps being able to build a bit of strength and a bit of muscle. Again, I'm not saying in an obsessive way, but that can just really help. I think you just feel better about your body and feel stronger and celebrate more what your body can do. But I think, again, it's really important, isn't it, to kind of keep that within healthy limits as well. So maybe doing it a few times a week, but also really important to prioritize rest. If you're kind of getting injured a lot and you still feel that you have to exercise, that's not so great. So it's trying to kind of keep in that healthy space. And I think I like to always think of exercise more as kind of joyful movement, things that you like, things that can be social, rather than something that you have to go and do every day for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know it's really important as we lose a lot of, we don't just lose fat, we lose muscle, we lose, as women also, we lose loads of bone density and all. So it's very important, but I can see how it can become your new thing to replace it. But Harriet, I can, we could sit here all day. I've got so many questions that I could ask you, but I am aware time is short, and I'm so grateful for everything that you've talked to us about today. Tell us how we can find you. Where can we find you? How can we work with you? And what you up to? What's going on?
Sure. So eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk is my website. So basically everything's on there if you want to kind of find out about different things. My Instagram is the eating disorder therapist _ podcast is the eating disorder therapist. So the link to my Patreon is on my website on the homepage, so people can go there. And then also I've got an online event I'm organising September the 30th, bringing together lots of professionals about inspiring prevention of eating disorders and body image issues as well. So I can give you some of the links to these things.
Fantastic.
And then you can just stick them in the notes.
I will. Thank you so much, Harriet. You know that, I'm not with this game. I'm new to the game of podcasting. So yes, I will put everything in the bottom of the show, of the, whatever you call it, the podcast. Everything will be right at the bottom, and you can find
notes.
Show notes. Is that what you call it? I don't know. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. But I will put everything on there, and I am going to be attending Harriet's event, and I'm really excited because whether you're interested in it, like me, from somebody who wants to work in this field, or somebody who just wants to learn about themselves and what is going on for them, because for the last 4 years, I have therapy, but, I did a lot of the work via reading and following Instagram accounts like yourself, podcasts and YouTube, to be honest. So there's a lot of work that you can do yourself, and, using these resources definitely goes a long way in supporting yourself if therapy one-to-one is not an option for you at the moment. But do you do one-to-one?
Yeah, no, I do one-to-one as well, actually. Yeah. So I have got a bit of waiting list, but, people are free to get in touch with me as well, via my website, and I can always give people more information about that.
Fantastic. Everybody, I couldn't recommend that you go over and check out Harriet's Instagram page, because she's got so much information on there. But yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Harriet.
Yeah, no, thanks so much.
I appreciate you for being here with me. I hope you got some value from this episode. If so, please give me a review. It will make me super happy and support others from our community to find the podcast. Share it with your Barry bestie. Connect with me on Instagram at Gastric Mindset. It'll be wonderful to hear from you.